Okay, let's start then. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, late this Friday evening. So you can write in the chat where you're joining us today. So we had one guest saying that he's joining us. So joining us from Kazakhstan, Mark from Kazakhstan, hello. So hello. Today we have, okay, so we have Nilufar Kurbanova with us again. So she made a really nice presentation, if you remember, some time ago about mistakes in curriculum design, as far as I remember, right? So Nilufar Kurbanova, and thank you for doing this the second time. Thank you for coming back and showing the initiative actually to talk to our audience. So Nilufar Kurbanova, she's the Webster University TESOL program alumni, and currently she works as an English language teacher at school number 30 in Bostan Churchill Academic Lyceum, but also she's a teacher trainer at the Avaloni Center, the Center for Training, Teaching Staff, named after Avaloni. So, and today we have really important topic. So it's about modern techniques and methods of teaching reading effectively. And I think we all know the importance of reading to learn a language, but also other skills and worldview, etc. I think reading is the quintessential in children's development or any person's development throughout their life. So because there is a quote saying, whenever you read a good book somewhere in the world, a door opens to allow in more light, or even our Holy Quran. So the first word that was sent to our prophet was Iqra, right? So read. So bearing in mind the importance of reading, so today Nilufar will share her insight and tips about how we can teach reading more effectively. Thank you, Nilufar, and over to you.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Nadra, for inviting me to this webinar, and I'm very glad to see you again. And today I'm going to share my knowledge and experiences as a teacher trainer and as an EFL teacher. And in this webinar, and I think many teachers will get fruitful information from this webinar. And the topic of today's presentation is modern methods and techniques developing reading skills. Many teachers and students are also interested how to, usually in IELTS examinations or other types of exams, high-stake exams, they are very interested in developing their reading skills or improving their reading strategies, and they always want to know better. For these purposes, I have prepared this presentation today, and the agenda of our webinar is easy steps to create a perfect reading unit, essential reading skills we're going to discuss, and how to teach a perfect reading lesson, and simple ways to make reading lessons fun, which is very interesting for many teachers, and they are always in search of finding new ways of teaching reading, and they mostly think that most teachers think that reading can be a part of their lessons, ESL lessons. That's why their classes. And recently I have searched a lot, and I think that I could find some interesting. And from my searching, I could find some interesting resources. That's why I decided to share it with everyone. And I mean that sharing is caring. And as an introduction, we can say that reading is always interesting, and not to be not to get them bored, usually we should choose authentic, more difficult materials and with more challenging vocabulary for reading. And the structure usually should be very simple.
Okay.
And the structure also should be very simple and not weight down vocabulary complexity for beginner students. And so that they are not worried about new words exactly at the beginning levels. And the structure, also the length of the text should not be very, for example, higher or more above their exact levels of proficiency. And usually reading itself is the action or skill of reading. It is written or printed matter silently or aloud. Usually some students prefer reading silently, or sometimes we want them to read aloud in our classes. And the learning outcomes are have already been set today. And by the end of this webinar, teachers and students will apply the principles and strategies of teaching reading effectively. And they are going to make reading a fun activity for their students, and they can evaluate the need for reading for students. And before starting this, the main session, I'm going to ask you some warming up questions. What do you understand by schemata in reading, or schema? Sometimes we can say schema story, schema theory. You can share your ideas in the chat box, or you can unmute yourselves. Have you ever thought about schemata, or have you ever heard about schema theory? Any ideas? Yes. Description. Okay. Okay. Now, schemata is usually, now I'm going to explain by this image. What is it? Schema theory is usually our background information about the text, about the topic. Before reading the text, entire text, we can go to our background knowledge, and we can remember something. Usually schema refers to this, and I'm going to explain by this image today. And also schema theory usually explains how readers utilize their prior knowledge to understand and get new information from the text. As Rumelart states. And the theory usually claims the written text does not carry meaning by itself. It usually only guides readers to retrieve or construct the meaning, and from structure itself to patterns of this prior knowledge. And these structures are usually called schemata, or singular is schema. How it works, how schema works usually, or examples. For example, imagine that you are teaching, or the reading passage is about transportation, to read about transportation. For example, you would trigger our schematic knowledge about different types of transportation, such as land, bicycle, motorcycle, car, van, bus, train, or subway. You can write on the board. And students try to remember, for example, the names of land transportation or the names of bicycle using their prior knowledge and experiences here. Someone says airplane, ship, and at this stage, at the beginning of this reading passage, you can trigger their attention, or everybody can be engaged or involved from the beginning. And this is just one example. And also, you can read the passage about airports, such as, for example, everyone knows some or has some information in their minds about airports, and they can say that airplanes can fly and they have wheels that they can land on, or they can take passengers to different places. They have wings that make them fly, and etc. And schema theory is usually related to other important notions, and namely to top-down and bottom-up processing. Have you ever heard about, or have you ever read about top-down and bottom-up processing while teaching reading? You can write your ideas or experiences in the chat box. Top-down and bottom-up processing. Someone says, yeah, I know, but how? Bottom-up processing and top-down processing in reading. What are they? You can write on the chat box. Okay, Madina Bono, you raised your hand. Any ideas? Bottom-up and top-down processing. Okay, maybe guessing, skimming. Someone says scanning. Okay. Nazima.
I think it's hello everyone. I think it's a bottom-up process and top-down process. It's understanding text generally, and maybe it's just top-down, and bottom-up it's understanding all the like scanning, skimming, and detailed information, knowing the detailed information about the text. It's
okay,
just
yes.
my opinion. Yeah.
Yes, you are really close. Okay. And here you can see how schema works, or how top-down and bottom-up processing work. Can you guess which one is top-down and which one is bottom-up processing in reading? For example, if we imagine the whole wall, is it bottom-up processing or top-down?
It's bottom-up process, I think.
Which one?
The first one, the whole wall.
The whole wall is top-down or bottom-up?
Bottom-up.
Okay, and this one is top-down, you mean?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you. Well, top-down, top-down processing is the using background knowledge to predict the meaning of a text or of the reading or listening text, and developing hypotheses about the context of the content of the text, or to the uptake of information related to prior knowledge. And they can guess, and they can share their ideas, they can imagine in this process. And what about bottom-up processing? It is identifying actual words or sounds, constructing meaning from the most basic units of a language, vocabulary, letters, letter clusters, and words. And in bottom-up processing, also we can emphasize the decoding skills, which means that we are trying to remember the process. And students usually try to remember the information in this process, and usually the teacher guides learners to recognize broad to the understanding of the text. There is a metaphor which I showed you. If we imagine top down, for example, as a whole wall, students just can see the wall from outside, and they can't see the inside part of the wall, and they can just using their imaginations, their background knowledge. And what about the bottom-up processing in reading? In bottom-up processing in reading, you are taking the, for example, they are putting the bricks aside with your students, and they can go with the language, and they can go to the grammar and, for example, vocabulary they are discussing. And after that, they understand the text, the whole text, and they're just going or putting the bricks aside. This is a metaphor while we are teaching, we are explaining top-down or bottom-up processing. Also here you can see that the structure, or we can say this image also can genuinely explain the process. Top-down processing, it is using models we can to explain, or during the introduction part of our reading passage as a teacher, we can use models to explain ideas we can get from them, and expectations to interpret sensory information. In this process, students usually think, and is that something I have seen before or I have read before? And in the bottom-up processing can be taking sensory information and then assembling, integrating and implementing it. And students can see that and imagine, or can ask the question, what am I seeing here? And do you read intensively or extensively in class? What do you think? While you are teaching reading, how do you usually read? Intensively or extensively with your students? What do you think? Is it extensive reading or intensive reading? For example, take any textbook. Usually, we are reading intensively. Okay, Nazima.
Yeah, usually when we teach someone for reading skill, we read intensively. We will try to use some kind of aim before reading the text, but extensively, it's for pleasure, for not for achieving or for receiving some kind of task.
Yes,
I say.
You're right. Yes, bingo. Usually intensive or extensive reading can be like this. Intensive reading involves the deconstruction of a text, and the aim is getting as much information as possible. And through reading intensively, we are concerned with every detail related to the text, and the learner is encouraged to deal with the vocabulary, grammar activities, and they get closer to understanding of the text. And what about extensive reading? Extensive reading, also reading as much as possible without concerning oneself every detail. Students usually do not focus on unknown words or expressions there. Occasional unknown words are not supposed to get too much attention, and their focus can only be on the overall meaning. And extensive readers look up the words just in emergencies, which means that when they are really necessary to them, and they can look up the words from dictionaries or any source of information they can search. And try to remember that usually in classes, in learning purposes or in teaching purposes, we read intensively. And what about the principles of teaching reading? As nation states above, teaching grammar should follow specific principles that help boost reading skills. Reading is a purposeful enterprise for a teacher. And while training students, we should develop their reading skills to fulfill a range of purposes. And the teacher has a range of goals. And we can say that we are going to search for specific information through skimming and scanning activities. And students are going to learn and gain knowledge about different topics, and they should be entertained and they should react to a text and they say about its content. Also, the appropriateness to students' level is also vital and important, and vocabulary knowledge they can gain at the end of any text or reading passage. And what about reading skills? We use different skills in reading, such as we usually focus on developing reading skills, such as phonemic awareness, spelling practice, vocabulary learning, and grammar study. And the strategies can be previewing, setting a purpose, predicting, asking questions, connecting to background knowledge, and paying attention to its structure, and guessing words from the context, and paying attention to everything, or guessing words from the context, reflecting on the text or reading to it. And text types can be important for a reader, and we can also say genre of reading. Students usually are expected to guess the genre of it or to identify the genre of a text, such as whether they are reading emails, reports, stories, newspaper articles, and scientific texts during reading classes. And reading a lot. Usually, by reading a lot, we have many expectations, and learners must be also encouraged to read a lot, such as extensive reading helps them become fluent and develop the speed of at reading different texts, and we can improve their competency and for academic success or in students' future careers. And how to teach reading skills? Teachers usually have their objectives and aims, and they should plan their lessons structurally. And teachers make decisions about the objectives of their reading comprehension lessons. And they can use following reading skills, such as reading for a gist, reading for specific information, reading for detailed comprehension, or developing speed reading. Are they training learners in specific reading strategies, interfering meaning from the context, and a combination of the above goals? And how to teach reading usually depends on the way the lesson is structured. And obviously, we can say that usually reading lesson plans should include 3 stages, 3 typical, or we can say traditional stages, such as pre-reading stage, while reading stage, and post-reading stage. And in pre-reading activities, usually students or teachers can use different techniques, or the lesson can become or can have different stages or different activities, such as, and also we have different aims. Pre-reading activities help students become more prepared for what they are reading about, and activities can help learners anticipate the topic of reading, and they can formulate expectations about the content of the text, which help learners prepare themselves for the kind of language, vocabulary, and even grammatical structures. And activities create, or we can say warming up activities or pre-reading activities can create the need for reading the text to know more about a topic. And by creating the need to learn more about the topic, we can activate or we can increase our students' motivation. And teachers must activate students' knowledge about the topic of the text they are reading about, or they can also use the following activities. Brainstorming activities, we can say, and which can not be missed. We can sometimes some mentors or trainers or offer. This may be done following this process. They can be in groups. Students brainstorm ideas relating to the topic of the text. All the members should be involved, or they can contribute to the generation of ideas about the topic. And any ideas should be accepted, and the teacher sets a time for brainstorming process. And After generating enough ideas, groups or students organize their ideas and form sentences, or they can share ideas with their peers. Finally, they share their ideas with the whole class or everybody. And before reading, there are some tips how to organize our reading effectively and how it should be beneficial for students. And students also should have their own outcomes or their own aims before reading the text. And there is a chart such as KWL chart: know, want to know, or learned. Students can or you can divide the chart into 3 columns, and students can write, before reading, they can write what they already know about the content or about the topic, and what they want to know in the further stages of the reading lesson, and what they have learned after reading lesson or post-reading, as a post-reading activity. You can use this chart, the 3rd column. They can write there and what they have learned from this lesson, what are their insights from reading. And also there could be some discussions and pictures they can draw and they can predict. And while reading activities also can be very important, there should be clouds of words, videos you can use, and connecting students' prior knowledge with the content of the reading, and we can help them gain new knowledge, and you should train them deal with similar text in the future. And the following are a few examples of while reading activities, such as skimming or scanning. Skimming can be reading little, such as headings and subheadings of the text, reading the introduction or the first paragraph, reading the topic sentences of each paragraph. Students look at pictures, charts, and graphs and pay attention to italicized or bold-faced words or phrases there, and reading the concluding paragraph. And what about scanning? Scanning usually refers to reading for specific information such as name, date, numbers, and this is a technique used when one is interested finding specific information quickly. And teachers want to ask your students to scan a text to find answers to a specific questions, and usually the questions, with these questions in mind, students read the text to attempt to find answers, different answers to only these questions, and pay attention to that. They should not worry about the other words or the other. They should focus on. They should focus on only the text question there, and they may ignore irrelevant information. And students may use headings and any other clues that will help them identify which part of the text maybe contain the needed information. And in other words, they will have a read selectively and skip through irrelevant sections of the text. And comprehension questions, or we can say pronominal questions or WH questions. And by this way, you can also improve their critical thinking, such as who, what, when, where, how, and why. And usually you can also use in reading such different commands, such as identify, circle, underline, describe, explain. And I can advise you that before starting ESL classes or EFL classes, students should be aware of instructions in reading so that they couldn't ask questions while they are reading, and they should not, so that they could concentrate on the passage. And yes, no questions, true, false statements, and multiple choice questions can be sentence completion. And graphic organizers, you can use cohesion, such as they can identify the connectors in the text, however, moreover, thus, and they can see how ideas are linked within the text. And vocabulary and grammar work. And post-reading activities can include what I learned question. They should answer the question what I learned, and there can be discussions. They summarize the whole text and with their own ideas, and they can express their experiences related to the topic, and they can retell the story, and think, pair, share, drawing can be, and also presentations. And what about easy steps to create a perfect unit? As we mentioned above, there are some stages. Now I have already structuralized so that it could be visible to everyone, such as the first step is getting ready. Students think, discussion questions, activating the schemata, and introduce the vocabulary. They can guess the meaning from the text. You can give sentences with vocabulary, and no need to use dictionaries sometimes. And we can learn, or we can teach our students so that they could be independent from their dictionaries. And ask about sentences to make sense. And while they are reading, they can communicate process. And jigsaw reading can be a very interesting for them, such as you can cut different parts of the text or paragraphs, each paragraph of the text, and they can divide to everyone or to different groups of students. And after that, they can work in groups, or they can work together, and they can bring the parts of the text as a whole. And you can assign students to read the entire text at home if you don't have enough time during the lesson. And check comprehension. It is very important, and check by written methods, such as they can write their summaries and answer questions. They can also create their own questions related to the text or topic, and artistic and interactive approach can be by the teacher, and retelling, small discussions, pictures, and quizzes. And important part is applying skills, what they have learned. Imagine that, or be sure that whether they have understood the text, such as point out specific grammatical structures. You can use verb tenses and adjectives for beginners, or more complex structures for advanced learners, or relative clauses. They can be any more difficult or more challenging grammatical structures, you can say, because students usually always, or in the textbooks, usually texts are related to grammatical structures, or for example, the texts are in one grammatical structure, such as if you are teaching your students present simple, and if it is daily routines, usually the structure always relates or focuses on using present simple in the context. And sometimes vocabulary you can teach, or you can focus on there, also know the structures they are studying. And as a teacher, we have our syllabi, or we have our different plans, and we usually know what grammatical structures they are learning now, and we should focus on that structure. And you can extend the activity. Don't depend on the textbook itself, and be creative as much as possible, and analyze the stages, giving valuable judgments, and students apply the information in practice. And easy discussion questions you should create beforehand. And you can also have surveys, debates, or additional research to extend reading. And also the teacher can extend any kind of activities. If there are just several or a pair of activities, you should not focus on them anymore, and you should create your own activity, or you can activate your students' learning, such as tools or online tools you can use, and etc. It's up to your creativity. And our recommendation is don't just use activities in the textbook itself, and you should use everything, or you try to engage students as much as possible, or as you can. And essential reading skills, now I'm structuring again. The reading is very essential, because if there is more reading, better academic success will be in the future. Or fundamental reading skills they can acquire during the lessons. Not only lessons, but outside the class, you can give them texts for extensive reading. And reading for scanning or skimming stages at the beginning, we have mentioned already. Reading for specific information, or looking over the selection quickly but carefully and find information, stop reading there. And skimming can also be a quick type of reading, and learning the main points. Read the first, last paragraph, the tip can be, or read the first and the last sentence, and pay attention to italicized or bold words, headings or subheadings. And reading for detail, usually not many teachers are aware of reading for detail, or you should identify whether you are reading for a detail, such as it can be careful reading or reading for a detail, slower reading process, read every sentence but not to understand each word. And by reading a detail, 80% of information can be gained, and easy reading but specific strategies. And how to make or how to teach a reading lesson, or how to make it fun. As we can see here, warming up activities should be 5-10 minutes long, and so that they could move and speak during the classes at the beginning, or they can generate interest. There should be discussions. We could give related vocabulary, and students write words on the board, and teacher also should bring a ball when she or he is asking vocabulary related to the text, and ask some vocabulary and ask them to underline, highlight the new vocabulary. And how they practice and produce. In the practicing process, students read aloud, and they read the text passage, or teaching can make them read the passage pausing. They can pronounce the difficult words. And what about practicing again during the reading? They can understand the material, ask synonyms, antonyms, or pictures, true, false questions, why the statement is true and false. Students identify there, and they have to know how to answer these kind of questions by a teacher, and fill in the blanks fill in the blank sentences. And they can produce their knowledge by preparing discussion questions using keywords or key phrases. For beginners, very simple questions we have to prepare, and they can also should have time to share their viewpoints, such as to express their agrees or disagrees. And in the reviewing process, we can ask summarizing questions, ask our students search topic sentences. And what about simple ways to make reading classes fun? And usually every teacher has a problem of making their reading classes fun, or reading classes very funny, or everyone is interesting, or everyone thinks that reading classes are very not engaged, or sometimes students can get bored, and they are worried about new words, or there are some ideas how to make the class fun. And you can decorate the class, you can praise students during the lesson or during the activities, during all activities we can mean, inspire them to read, take a photo, and you can take the photo of star students. What does this mean? In the following slides, you will be aware of it in details, such as you can create a star-studded bulletin board. You can take a photo of a student who is a star in reading class today, or also in a week or in a month. And you can stick stars near the pictures. You can take the photo of your students and you can stick stars every time they read or every time they achieve, or they can have achievements. And reading log they have to run. What does this mean? The teacher should show how it works. Reading log can be, here I forgot to visualize this. Reading log can be like a diary. For example, you can have the list of reading materials there, and the students put tick or together with the teacher if you have read it, or if you have read the next passage for this month or for this week, or if they know whether they know everything there. And you should show how it works, how reading log works. And by this way, students can get encouraged to read, and they can understand the importance of reading. And review the log each week, each month, or together, or you can discuss the results together with your parents also, and or the other interested people. And you can host a book exchange. What does this mean? A book exchange can be that, for example, your students in one class are reading one book and in a month, and they have already read and they know everything, or they know the content, they have already discussed, they have read summaries, their own summaries, and now it's time to exchange it with another class. You can give it to another class to read, and one day you can organize a book review party maybe. And by this way, they can get engaged, or they can have good relationships with each other. And also, you can create a classroom, a special classroom, a special fun classroom for them. And by this way, they can choose what to read. You can see different wagons, sample wagons, and it's up to your decision. It's up to your imagination with your students. You can create your classroom wagon, and which can be fun, functional reading wagon. And you can decorate together, and you can keep books there, chapters or passages you are going to read. And I think also we can also use some kind of trolleys, and you can decorate the trolleys there, which we can see in the supermarkets and easy to find, yes. And you can decorate it, and some students or one student every time can pull the wagon or the trolley, and anyone can choose their item or their reading passage for every lesson. And also you can use some series or serial stories, we can say. Students can read different series, and they can get interested to read the content, or we can say how to summarize the text, which can be very interesting for them and engaging for them. And we can grab their attention by this. And for example, Harry Potter books, maybe any kind of series you can use, and students try to read every time. And students remember their reading teacher forever. Don't forget that. And you can read a short selection every day while you are reading series, and students continue at home. And after that, when they come to the classroom, they can discuss together with their peers and maybe with another class students. And you can use sound effects, which can be very interesting for primary class students or junior students, we can say they can add sound effect while we are reading different texts, such as students make specific sounds when we are reading stages, such as the sound of pig when we are reading the pig was going along the river, and etc. And we can design a place. You can provide a comfortable place to read so that we can make several houses with a door window. Now we can I can show you how it looks like, and it also depends on your creativity as a teacher. You can use everything, and students should have their reading corners. A pair of students or some 2 or 3 students can read every time, and they can get interested next time, for example, to be the next students who sit there. By this way, and you can grab their interests, and they can be get interested in reading classes. And also, don't forget to write there the notice, shh, someone is reading. Also, students after reading, after they have read the whole book, they can design covers. You can see just sample cover, for example, and you can ask your students to design or to draw their own covers for the book they have finished, or maybe some images, or they can use their drawings for some kind of stories or reading passages at the end. Maybe at home you can ask to visualize that story, and believe that by this way you can see that how creative they are in the class. And these techniques can work for every student, for every age of students. And also there are some engaging, you can engage listeners, or magic carpets you can create there, or you can bring some kind of carpets or music you can sound. For example, play classical or jazz music during reading. And also you can create a magic carpet for your classroom, and students can sit, and they're in a circle. The whole class can sit in a circle, maybe just several students this time, and the other students next time can sit on that carpet, on that magic carpet, and they can read. By this way, we can make our reading classes fun. And if we conclude our session today, by reading, we can achieve many things in not only in the classroom, but also outside the classroom. By reading, students can acquire the language very easily, and it is also a good model for future writing. Many students in EFL context ask that how they can improve their writing skills. I can say that in one webinar, Mr. Ulukbek mentions that a good reader is always a good writer. I believe that good readers can be good writers in the future. That's why read a lot. And it's also a good opportunity for language study, and step by step or day by day, through extensive or through intensive reading, students can get engaged, or students can be motivated to read a lot. And from time to time, we can achieve our goals, or we can, if we have already set our learning outcomes at the end of the course, they can do everything which you have expected from them. And reading genuinely should be selected by a teacher, and the materials should be very authentic. Don't forget that for native speakers, not for foreign language learners. Usually they have different real everyday situations or language contexts. Everything can be caught by students easily. And we can differentiate scanning and skimming. And students usually read for different purposes, for pleasure, for detailed information. And the content should be very engaging. and there should be prediction time and matching tasks to the topic, and etc. Usually teachers are also should be very imaginative. We should also read the reading passage beforehand, and at least before a week or before 10 days, you have to read the text, and you should be aware of its context or content, and you can create your activities, or you can plan your own lesson. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was really comprehensive webinar where you could cover all the principles of teaching reading, as well as some fun and engaging activities to teach reading. Thank you. So do we have any questions from the audience?
Here in today's webinar, I also wanted to include how to assess reading, but after that I changed my mind, because just assessing reading is also another topic, another big topic we could focus on. That's why I'm going, maybe in our further presentations or further webinars, I'm going to focus on how to assess language skills such as reading, writing, or listening separately.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so we're just having lots of thanks. Yeah, the slides were visible, or like they were comprehensive and clear. Thank you so much. I think we don't have any questions. Okay, can we do an evaluation? Okay, so they're asking, I think, is it about assessing? If you mean about assessing reading, so you just heard Nilüfer saying that we hope to organize another webinar on that.
Thank you. Any ideas can be shared now, and any feedback can be accepted by you.
Yes, please. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for today's webinar. It was really useful for me, as I am a student now, and I learned new methods for me. For example, about vegans, I didn't know about, but now I want to use it.
Thank you. You can take anything. You can use your imagination. Maybe a wagon, or maybe a trolley, as I mentioned above.
Oh yeah, and I have a question. How can we choose reading topics for primary students, especially from 5 to 10?
Usually they are not aware of reading very much, because their meta language has not been developed yet. If you have seen, for primary students, especially for very young learners, usually we can use, or some linguists can recommend that we cannot use them reading. We cannot encourage them to read a lot, because their attention, they have not good attention yet. That's why if they are 5 or 6 year students, usually you can use the method of total physical response. You can use some activities, songs, music, dancing. You can use them. But if they know just maybe phonetics, you can use, for example, Apple A at the beginning. But I can't recommend to teach them, just make them read a lot. But if they are 7 years old, if they are already at schools, you can start from little texts, tiny reading passages. For example, hello, good evening, good morning, and apple, they can read there. And you can analyze the alphabet, for example, apple, how it is usually spelled. For example, apple A, P, double P, etc. And after that, at the age of 9 or at the age of 10, they start reading.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I think,
Sure.
yeah, Nilüfer, right, but you can read books for them, right? So
Yes,
total using it like a
uh-huh.
storytelling, right?
Yes,
Showing
storytelling
pictures.
time can be very beneficial for them or useful, but
Mhm.
I'm not sure that they can read.
Sure. Yeah. So it's just reading at this age is like you read and they listen and you just involve them and show the
Yes.
pictures, right? Yeah, and they may.
If we read stories, they can imaginate their stories. For example, they
Right.
can draw their pictures.
Right, right. But you can start, but as Nilüfer said, by drawing the attention to some specific words, right? If there is a text, we can say like, find all the ends. I don't know, like, right? So things like that. So they can try to, that's how, like, I remember my children were learning to read when they were in kindergarten. So in English, so they learned in English as a first language. So that's what they would do. Like the teacher would read, but then like even she would write some message on the board and then she would ask like circle all the, they call it sight words, the most frequent words like and or I, find all eyes, for example. And children are happy, you know, they think, oh, I'm reading, you know, I can recognize one word, right? So that's also build their confidence step by step, and so that they fell in love with reading.
Yes, and also don't forget that because many teachers and students ask the question, how can I learn a foreign language effectively? I can say that remember a child from a newborn child, or at the age of 2, or until the age of 2, usually they bear in mind just only words. Yes, they can listen from on television, from their mothers and from their relatives. They can hear different words. At first they decode the words, and usually they remember all, for example, some gestures they remember, and in their minds I think they gain vocabulary at first and they learn what is it, and after that they speak. At the age of 2 or at the age of 3, they can have a conversation, and they go after that they can go to school and they try to learn some letters, alphabet, and they try to read there, and they can write until the age of 12. They can read, they gain new knowledge, and they can empower their background knowledge, and after that they can write some kind of compositions, yes, at the age of 11 or 12. And that's why I can say that pay attention to this process.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, yeah, thank you very much. So I think yeah, we have like people saying they learned a lot, and I really second that. So yeah, thank you for the wonderful presentation today and answering the questions. Thank you, and thank you for to everyone for being with us, for sparing some time to join this webinar. Thank you and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.